You know, the rule sounds so simple, right? Do not do what you hate. But what happens when your job, the thing you need to survive, forces you to do just that? Well, we're about to unpack a story that kicks off with a totally ridiculous workplace argument, but it ends up revealing something incredibly profound about conscience, courage, and the very real price of betraying yourself. It all begins with this question. And I know, it sounds completely nuts. Is the term flip chart a form of abuse? But believe it or not, this exact question set off a massive corporate drama. And what it tells us about the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, pressures we all face, well, it's absolutely fascinating. Okay, so here's the setup. A client of mine working at a huge corporation gets pulled into this bizarre debate. The question on the table, is the term flip chart a secret derogatory slur aimed at people from the Philippines? Now get this, the way this all unfolded is just, wow. First off, nobody had actually complained. Not a single employee of Filipino descent had ever said, hey, this term bothers me. But that didn't stop management. Nope, they went all in, holding meeting after meeting to discuss it. And the grand conclusion? Flip chart was officially banned. Everyone now had to say easel pad. But oh, it didn't stop there, not even close. This whole thing snowballed into a kind of contest to find the next offensive word. Suddenly, things like blackboard and master key were on the chopping block, with these really flimsy, stretched connections to racism and slavery. What started as a weird debate was turning into a full-blown ideological witch hunt. And this quote from the client just hits the nail on the head. Imagine being in that room. How could you possibly raise your hand and say, hang on, this seems a bit much, without immediately being branded as hateful, as narrow-minded, or even just plain wicked? You couldn't. There was zero room for any kind of dissent.
So, you see, this wasn't just some silly workplace annoyance. It goes so much deeper. This story is a perfect window into the psychological price of self-betrayal, the genuine anguish that bubbles up when you're forced to do something you know, deep down, is just wrong.
Here's the absolute core of it. Being forced, day in and day out, to do things that are either stupid or hateful or both, it's deeply, deeply demoralizing. It's a soul-crushing experience because it forces you to act against the very fabric of who you are.
And this is where our conscience comes into play. Think of your conscience not just as that little nagging voice, but as your integrated psyche. It's the structure, the shelter that keeps you safe when life's storms are raging. To act against it? Well, that's like being the captain of your own ship and deliberately steering it right into the rocks.
This image really captures that feeling, doesn't it? That sense of falling, of self-destruction. Because when you betray that fundamental part of yourself, you're not just fooling your boss or your coworkers. You're actually cheating in the only game that truly matters, the one you play with yourself. And that leaves you with this gnawing emptiness, a loss that follows you home. Of course, this is not some new idea. This is timeless wisdom. Shakespeare nailed it centuries ago. To thine own self be true isn't just a nice little quote for a coffee mug. It's a fundamental principle for living a sane, stable life. To violate it is to pretty much invite chaos right into your soul.
So, what do? I mean, really, what are your options in a situation like this? You can't always just quit on the spot or declare all-out war on your bosses. The client's solution was actually really clever, a strategy of resistance she called a rearguard action. Here's her brilliant three-part plan. First, she used her position to become a speaker at corporate events. Second, instead of fighting the flip chart war head-on, which was a losing battle, she attacked the weak foundations of the whole thing. She gave talks discrediting the kind of pseudoscience that's so popular in HR, like the totally debunked theory of learning styles. And third, she reconnected with her true passion, journalism, and started writing articles warning people back home about the exact kind of groupthink she was seeing at work.
All right, let's zoom out for a second, because her story is not just about one person at one company. It's a perfect illustration of a huge, universal truth. It's the small, seemingly insignificant compromises that can lead to absolutely massive problems down the line.
I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Hell doesn't just show up one day unannounced. It arrives slowly, step by step, one tiny betrayal of your conscience at a time. It's those little compromises that pave the whole road. Here's exactly how that slippery slope works. Tyranny never asks for a giant leap off a cliff. It just asks for one tiny step back, then another, and each time you stay silent, you make it that much easier to stay silent the next time. You start rationalizing. And here's the kicker. If you can't bring yourself to object when the stakes are small, what on earth makes you think you'll have the courage when they're huge?
And this is exactly why the sovereign individual, that's the person who listens to their own conscience above the noise of the crowd, is so unbelievably important. They're the firewall. They're what prevents a group or even a whole society from becoming blind and dangerous. Your personal integrity, it turns out, is a powerful force for social good.
Okay, so let's get practical. How do you apply all of this to your own life? This next part is all about fortifying your own position so you can actually live with integrity without totally blowing up your career.
First things first, you have to know the difference between normal job frustration and a genuine betrayal of your soul. Look, hating your alarm clock, doing boring but necessary tasks, starting at the bottom, that's just part of work. That's not what we're talking about. A betrayal of the soul is something else entirely. It's being forced to do absurd, pointless work. It's being made to lie. It's having to treat people unjustly, or just standing by silently while it happens. Knowing which side of that line you're on is the crucial first step.
Now, let's talk about the big one, the elephant in the room, the fear that keeps so many people stuck in these soul-crushing situations, the absolute terror of not being able to find another job. It's a real fear, a powerful one, but we need to look at it with clear eyes.
Okay, brace yourself for this number, 50 to 1. Yep, that's often the typical ratio of job applications sent out to interviews you actually get. Now, I know that sounds terrifying, but just knowing it, facing that reality, is the first step to building the right mindset to get through it.
So why are the odds so high? Here's the most important thing to remember. It's not a personal failing. It's a statistical problem. For a lot of jobs, there's already an internal candidate they want. Companies just get flooded with resumes. They keep piles of applicants on hand just in case. Understanding that this is a numbers game, not a reflection of your worth, is absolutely key to not giving up.
And this brings us to a final, really powerful way to think about risk. We're all so afraid of the worst-case scenario of leaving a job. But have you ever really considered the worst-case scenario of staying? Remaining in a place that chips away at your soul. That might be the real disaster. That's a slow death, spread out over decades. And that is just not a good life. So, we end right back where we started, with this incredibly simple but profound rule. Do not do what you hate. And remember, this isn't a call to be lazy or to avoid difficult tasks. It is a moral command to protect your own soul, to refuse to take part in things that make you weak and filled with self-contempt. Because when all is said and done, your integrity is the most valuable asset you will ever have.